Let's not mince words here. Star Wars Battlefront 2's loot box-based progression system may very well be the worst and most predatory form of microtransactions ever conceived in a AAA title. Not only does progression revolve around what are essentially glorified slot machines, but also stingy payout for in-game currencies like credits and crafting parts means that players who don't pay would have to grind for thousands of hours to unlock everything. It's EA's way of strong-arming players into purchasing loot boxes to speed things up and gain significant gameplay advantages over others. They've practically built the game so that if you don't pay recurrently, you will have an inferior or downright miserable gameplay experience. Now, EA temporarily removed microtransactions just hours before the game launched, so players haven't been able to gamble to have a significant competitive edge. But with a progression system not being adjusted to compensate for that, what we were left with is just a shitty progression system. Suffice to say that there was no sense of pride and accomplishment felt anywhere near this game. Now, just today, EA announced some of the changes that they would be making to Battlefront 2, namely in the form of boosted multiplayer rewards. The following information comes from the game's official website, which published an update detailing 3 major changes. The first is that end-of-round payout has been increased across the board. According to EA, this is an area we agree needed to be buffed a bit, especially when it comes to rewarding players for doing well in-game. We're upping the number of credits you get for a match across the board, and specifically bumping the top players on each team by even more. Players who logged into the game today have confirmed that this change has in fact taken place, with this screenshot showing a player earning 615 credits after a match, which is roughly double what they used to earn. The second change is that you can now earn 3 times more credits in arcade mode before you hit the daily cap. Before, the cap was 500 credits before you'd have to wait until the next day, but now it's been increased to 1,500 credits. The third and final change is that daily login crates will now provide more crafting parts than before. Crafting parts are, of course, the currency required to upgrade your star cards, around which the entire multiplayer mode revolves around. Reports from social media suggest that whereas before you only used to get 5 crafting parts in daily crates, players who logged in today received 15. Hooray. So overall, how do I feel about these changes? Yeah, they're not even close to being enough. This is what took them 17 days to come up with. This is the best they could do in all that time. They think that just handing out more credits and crafting parts will mitigate all the issues? I thought they were going back to the drawing board and working on an overhaul for this hideous monstrosity of a progression system. The fact still remains that Battlefront 2's Star Cards progression system is tied to loot boxes, to a game of chance. Once they reintroduce the ability to purchase loot boxes through microtransactions, we are still looking at a system in which players can gamble their way towards having a competitive edge, which is harmful to both the integrity of fair competition and players who might be struggling with gambling addiction. Sure, the grind may have been significantly reduced, but now instead of taking over 4,000 hours to unlock everything, it might take over 2,000 hours. That's still time that most people don't have. It's still enough of a grind to twist people's arms to shell out extra cash. Not to mention that because there is still not enough of a delineation between how much MVPs and major contributors of a match are rewarded compared to players who contribute nothing, the game still encourages the AFK rubber band trick to farm credits. By simply resorting to doubling credits across the board, EA also increased the amount of credits that AFK credits farmers earn as well, so if anything, there is now more incentive for them to use this exploit. Reports from Reddit have already suggested that some players have been earning upwards of 500 credits per match doing this. Until they change the reward system so that the awarded credits are entirely calculated by percentage of individual players' scores rather than time spent in a match, I don't see this issue being resolved anytime soon. Going back to the recent adjustments, while the daily cap for arcade mode may have been increased, the fact that they still cap credits earnings at all is still insultingly stingy. I get that there needs to be consideration for balancing arcade mode earnings to not throw multiplayer progress off balance, but there are ways to do that without enforcing a hard limit, It still feels like EA is trying to artificially slow down how fast you can earn loot boxes and progress through the game to encourage microtransactions purchases down the line. Not to mention that EA can't make excuses about balancing credits earnings when their multiplayer progression is still all kinds of fucked, and when they have let the rubber band credits farming trick go unchecked after all this time. Oh, and the part about how you earn more crafting parts for star card upgrades, it's worth noting that it's not for loot crates across the board, it's just for the daily login crates. The amount of crafting parts that you earn from buying loot boxes with credits and such is still exactly the same. So even with the recent changes and improvements, EA is still being quite stingy about mitigating grind and generously rewarding players. Long story short, what we're looking at here is another classic case of EA backpedal. As they've done time and again, their hope is that by taking a few steps back and making some minor changes, headlines will change from EA royally fucked up to EA is listening to feedback. Their hope is that they will outdate the outrage by basically applying some band-aids to a tumor. But with all said and done, despite the recent tweaks, the game hasn't really changed all that much. It still has the same fundamental problems as before. As I've said many times, I believe that nothing short of a major overhaul will save this game. Nothing short of them completely segregating the game's progression system away from microtransactions and loot boxes can even begin to redeem this disaster. But even if by some miracle they end up taking such drastic steps, they won't, but this is hypothetically speaking, it's important that we never forget EA's original intentions with this title. We must always remember that they tried to sell us pay-to-win loot boxes in a premium-priced game, and they're still pushing towards that. That they tried to lock iconic characters of the Star Wars franchise like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader behind 40 hours of grind each, that they severely limited how much in-game currency you can earn on multiple fronts, and that they only backed off a little bit after an unprecedented level of backlash from gaming communities, the media, and government officials. We must never forget that at the end of the day, until EA shows otherwise with future releases, their only goal is to exploit us for uncapped monetization schemes. And with the recent debacle about UFC 3's beta featuring its own brand of pay-to-win card packs in the game's Ultimate Team mode, EA is showing no signs of stopping. Which is why it's so important that we never let them outdate the outrage with these little backpedals. The second we quiet down is the second that these greedy game publishers win. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found this video informative, and if you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon to help this channel stay independent and self-sustained. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.